Hello. Today we have someone coming to us from Vashon Island. We have mutual friends. We just found out before we started recording. Welcome, Pete. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, welcome. That was kind of cool. You and Sarah know all these musician people in common and
Yeah,
her, she comes from that. So that's neat.
yeah, totally.
And you're an adoptee.
I am. I most certainly am. That's why I'm here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
excited to hear your story.
Me too.
Yeah. Let's see. Where should I begin? I guess I'll begin in 1969 in Eugene, Oregon. How about that?
How about that? Baby
Um,
scoop era.
that's right. Full on right in the heart of the baby scoop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, my parents had adopted my brother 6 years prior in Eugene, Oregon, when they were living in Eugene. And then they since moved on to Minneapolis. And the lawyer who arranged the adoption with my brother in Eugene knew that they were interested in adopting another kid and reached out. And I was available apparently. And yeah, I was born in Eugene while my family lived in Minneapolis. So I was born, and then they got word that I was born. And then my mom came like the next day and scooped me up. We stayed in Eugene at a friend's house for about a week and then traveled back to Minneapolis where I was, living until I was 4 years old. Um, so, adopted at birth. Um, I always knew I was adopted as, as far back as I can remember.
Hmm.
So they were very open about it. Throughout my childhood, I didn't really think too much about it. Um, I had great parents. My adoptive parents, Jan and Arnie Droge, were both super amazing. So I had this, kind of, a lot of gratitude and didn't really feel like I needed any reason to investigate that any further. Um,
Hmm.
in fact, in the 90s, I was born in Oregon, so they changed the laws in the 90s. I can't remember exactly what year, but they had open adoption records. And I remember having dinner with my folks and they told me about it. And at that time I was like, yeah, not interested. I'm cool. That's fine. Really had no desire to connect with my birth mother and my family. Around the time I was turning 40, I got pretty serious about kind of self-reflection and looking within. Excuse me. Sorry. And, kind of asking a lot of questions, doing some soul searching about, where some of the anxiety and depression and
Hmm.
substance abuse issues that I had wrestled with throughout my life, where that stuff was coming from. And it's kind of a long story, but there was a flurry of a bunch of coincidences that all sort of pointed towards journaling, and then a random computer glitch. So I had all these coincidences, and that inspired me to start journaling. And one night I was just kind of like, okay, I was being very arm's reach about the journaling, kind of being very safe and timid.
Hmm.
And I kind of said something to the effect of like, okay, I need to like really get into the nitty gritty here and stop pussyfooting around. That was Thanksgiving weekend 2009. Um, After I had journaled that night, I had kind of an idea for a song. And so I came up here into my studio. I opened up my laptop to turn it on, which is where I would always record the sketches. And I was hitting the button and it wasn't turning on. And I kept trying, kept trying. And then, like, literally right in the instant that I was about to get up and go grab another machine to record on, it turned on and an error message came up. I just skipped it super fast because I didn't want to forget the idea. And I recorded my song. And then I went into the folder where the song ideas end up. And they're always listed in reverse chronological order. So the newest file was on top, but it wasn't there. So I started scrolling and scrolling. At the very bottom of the list was the file, and it was dated 1969, which was the year that I was born. And in that moment, I don't know how to describe it, like a flashback or a memory, or if it was my imagination or what it was, but I just instantly just flashed on myself as an infant. And in that moment, I had like a light bulb went off, and I was like, adoption. Hmm. Yeah, I thought, I sort of flashed as myself and I think, kind of just conceived of the idea of being separated from my birth mother. And that night I went to bed and I did a little bit of Googling around, like adoption, and uh, started, kind of learning about adoptees and common traits. And I was like, you've been reading my mail. It was very, very much like, okay, yep, check. And the next morning I woke up and it was just heavy duty tears, just immediately, like really, really intense. A lot came up in that weekend, and my wife, Elaine, who's my musical partner as well, we spent the weekend what we kind of jokingly called psyche detectives. And so we were kind of, tracing my life and looking at a lot of things kind of through the lens of adoption and thinking about how that, how that impacted my development. So, I pretty quickly discovered Nancy Verrier and the
Mhm.
book Primal Wound. Kind of got a crash course in trauma from a friend. I had been working, one of the coincidences around the journaling was a filmmaker named Ellie Camaro, and I was working on the music for her film. It was called A Lot Like You. And she had started making kind of an arm's reach movie about her father's culture in Tanzania. And her mother grew up in South Korea, and they were both first generation. So she was a first generation American. And so she wanted to make a movie for her daughter to kind of express to her and share her especially her father's side. Um, and as she started to make that movie, she interviewed her aunts and learned of this tremendously horrible sexual abuse that they had suffered, as kind of part of the culture.
Right.
It was normalized, and I won't go into the details, but it was, horrifying. So this put her at a crossroad as far as this movie because, she was a survivor of sexual abuse as well and had spent time as a counselor in that area. So she ended up ultimately, opening up and telling that part of the story in the film. And as this was developing, she took a page of her journals and just scanned it, attached it to an email, and sent it to me. And I was like, wow, like how amazing that, you could
Oh,
be that open to sharing this stuff. And that was a big inspiration. So she was someone that I leaned on right away and talked to her. And she had, this, like I mentioned, a counseling background. And she was just, an amazing friend and a great resource. And she put me in touch with a dear friend of hers who was a trauma counselor.
mhm.
So she counseled people who counseled people with trauma, but she was very, very well versed in all things trauma. And so in those first few days, I just, like I said, just a crash course in trauma and, you know, definitely feel like there was a lot to unpack there. Um, and as time went on, um, at first I thought, this is it. This is the whole thing, I found it. But what I learned over time was like the adoption experience and the separation from my birth mother and all of that. It was a piece of the puzzle. There were other factors involved, and I eventually found a therapist
Mhm.
and started to work through other childhood traumas. I discovered EMDR.
Done that too.
Yeah, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a professional. I can't make recommendations, but for our listeners, look into it if you haven't. I've never met
Agreed.
anybody who did it who didn't say that it changed their life for the better. It was really incredible. Um, so yeah, so that early phase was just really intense. Just I couldn't have imagined the intensity of the emotions that came up. And
Mhm.
so I kind of put my career on hold and just really needed time to process. And it was, so yeah, like I said, that was Thanksgiving weekend, 2009. And by December 27th, I felt like, okay, I'm ready to search for my birth mother. And at that
Wow.
point, I was very much birth mother centric. I wasn't really thinking about my broader family. I was just like, I want to meet my birth mother. And
Can I ask you something real quick?
sure.
Were you close to your adoptive family
Yeah, I was wondering.
and your
Yeah.
brother and
My parents and I super close. My brother and I were close growing up. We're not as close these days. We're very different. Um, so we don't have a lot in common.
Hmm.
But yeah, my parents and I, my father passed away in 2015, and we'll kind of get to that in the story later. And and my mom just passed away in June.
Oh,
oh,
Um,
sorry for your
sorry.
loss.
yeah, yeah. So that was, and actually, there's a song on my new record called "You Called Me Kid." So that I'll just jump ahead to the record a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
My new album has kind of the cornerstone songs on the album address different aspects of my adoption experience.
Oh,
So uh, there's a song called "Song for Barbara Ann." Well, anyway, yeah, I don't know how to
yeah,
do
it's
the
ours.
So
timeline here.
2000 December 2009.
Yeah, we'll go there. Yeah, we'll get
Okay.
to that. I December 27th, I decided to reach out to the state of Oregon and apply for the pre-adoption birth record. Um, and I got a little bit of information. They said both parents were studying music at the University of Oregon in
Hmm.
Eugene.
Isn't that
And I had known
awesome?
that. My
Oh,
parents had
you
told me that
did?
all my life. They said only the mother though.
Okay.
It said I knew that she played violin and that she had gone to school at the University of
Oh,
Oregon. That's all I knew. So they confirmed that, and both parents apparently
oh,
were studying music there at the time. And they told me at the time, I think it was going to be like 3 months or something, like a really long time before I was going to actually get the record. And I thought, okay, that'll give me time to get into therapy and kind of prepare for what this might be. And then 3 weeks to the day later, I got a call from Elaine at the post office, and she said, "It's here. And do you want the name?" I said, "Sure." And over the phone, she gave me the name, and I Googled it. And in the first page of results was her obituary.
oh,
Oh.
Yeah.
that's so often the case.
Yeah. So she had passed just months prior.
Oh,
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So that, yeah, you can tell.
You had a
Like
whole other layer of grief.
it was
yes.
really, really mind-bogglingly intense grief. Like, because I had kind of built up this anticipation and this
Yeah.
hope and had kind of fantasized about what that was going to mean. And yeah, it was really intense.
I think we fantasized, well, I fantasized my whole life with who she was, and my mother was not alive when I found out too. And
Right.
it's really like, wait, what? That's the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
sorry. Gosh.
Yeah. So that was really intense. In the obituary were the names of her surviving relatives. And on that night, I was on the phone with my grandmother, who at the time was 84 and is now 98. And we talk
Mm.
every week.
What?
And my uncle. So her younger brother by 12 years. So he was just 8 years older than me, or still is. And just felt an immediate connection with them. Yeah, just bonded right away. Um,
Can I
I,
ask how she
Yeah.
died?
she died at 60 of a stroke.
Gosh.
Oh.
It's
Yeah,
good to know too. Wow.
yeah, yeah.
And did she have any other kids?
No, she had no other kids.
Hmm.
She was married a couple years after I was born, and eventually we did find him. And he had a very common name, and we're like, oh, great.
Yeah.
But Elaine got on the computer and sleuthed around and kind of cross-checked some a school that Barb, my birth mother, I call her Barb, that Barb had attended, the Earlham School of Religion in Indiana, and we found him. And interestingly, the trauma stewardship counselor that I had spoken with, I was an avid meditator at the time, and she turned me on to a few different teachers, among them Thich Nhat Hanh and Pema
Hmm.
Chodron.
Oh, I
Of
love her.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's
Both of
amazing.
them.
Yeah, and so I really, really resonated with Pema Chodron,
Me
especially,
too.
and had been listening to a lot of her Dharma talks at
Hmm.
that time. And so when I met, who Richard, who would have been my stepfather, it turns out uh, he had just had dinner with Pema Chodron like the week before.
Wow.
Um, he was a teacher at the school that Pema's teacher, Chogyam Trungpa, founded in Boulder, Colorado.
Yeah. Know
So
it.
that was kind of a cool little coincidence. yeah, lots of coincidences through all of this
Yeah.
stuff. And I'll share one anecdote here that was pretty amazing. So Richard was able to send me a bunch of letters that Barb had written him when they were dating, um, and they were separated. You know, they were just in different places. They weren't separated technically, but
Right.
she was sending him all these letters. And I just left them in a pile. I was like, okay, I'll wait till I'm really ready and have the space to dig into this, and I'll read them. And so I sat on them for a while, and then there was a weekend. We can maybe talk about this later too. There's a lot of workaholic in my life. You know, I sort of substituted drugs and alcohol for work,
Yeah.
and so I was work, and I decided to give myself a full weekend off. And um, the first thing I did, I had one of those little mini iPods at the time, and I used to listen to the Tao Te Ching.
Mhm.
And so I was just walking out the door to go work on my trails in the woods. It was something I'd like to do to kind of unwind. And I hit play on the little iPad. And the first thing that it said was, it was chapter 20, and it said, "Stop thinking and end your problems." And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, that's what I need to hear right now. This is perfect, you know? And so fast forward through the end of the weekend on Sunday night, I was like, okay, I'm going to go through these letters. And I read them all, and he had made notes, you know, describing, oh, and it says this name, that's my brother-in-law or whatever. And I got through it, and on the very last page of the very last letter on the back, she had transcribed that very same chapter of the Tao
No,
Te Ching to him.
to him.
Yeah. And I was just like, what? Amazing.
Wow.
It was crazy.
The people that are survived, like my mother's family and the men she was with, are so instrumental in knowing who she is for me. So I'm sure this was
Yeah, me
like,
too. Yeah.
And had he known about you?
yeah, I wonder.
I don't recall if he did or not, actually. You know, this has been many years since we had our original phone calls. I just reconnected with him recently because I wanted to get permission to use some pictures that he was in the video for the song that I wrote for Barb. Um, so yeah, where did we leave off here? Yeah, so
You
the birth
talked,
record arrived. Um, I learned about
Yeah.
ambiguous grief, which I'm sure
Yeah.
you guys are aware of.
Mhm.
That was it, big time. And yeah, so this was January of 2010 that I connected with them, felt an immediate kinship, um, and like you're talking about, started to kind of get a sense of who Barb was. My favorite memory of the very first call with my uncle, um, he said, let me put it to you this way. Cynthia, Barb's younger sister by 2 years, he said, Cynthia was the Beatles, but Barb was the Stones. She
I'm
was,
with Barb.
yeah, me too. And I
That's
was like, all right,
cute.
great.
I
She's
like
cool.
that.
So she was, a flower child,
Yeah.
definitely, a hippie.
Yeah.
She and her husband at that time, they were into, environmental issues, way before it was trendy. And,
Yeah.
they were really interesting, fascinating people. Um, so yeah, started to kind of get a picture of who she was. Um, my birth mother, or sorry, my grandmother basically said, she never would have really been in a position to be capable of raising a child. Um, I think she just didn't have it in her. Um, don't really know what the circumstances were about her coming out to Eugene. I have a little suspicion that perhaps she got pregnant and maybe her dad helped to arrange for her to come out to Eugene.
Where was she?
Uh, she was in Ohio.
Okay,
So
Oh,
so the whole family, and that's
yeah,
where
yeah, they were
she was
born. Yeah,
in with,
yeah.
and that's where she was met your father,
Um,
or they were.
I don't know anything about the birth father.
oh,
Yeah,
Oh,
still.
yeah,
oh,
yeah, yeah. Still no information about the birth father. It was left blank, and we've had some clues. And my wife and I went down to Eugene and searched through every yearbook, looking at pictures. Does this guy look like me?
No
Um,
DNA? You haven't done any?
I've done Ancestry and
Oh,
23andMe, and
nothing.
no hints that are close enough. A lot of third and fourth cousins, but
Wow.
nobody close enough to figure it out. So I'm sort of hopeful that by putting out this record and kind of sharing the whole story and talking about Barb, that maybe someone will go, I was in Eugene in 1969. I know who she was dating or
I
whatever,
mean,
maybe,
really.
maybe
Yeah.
we'll connect that way. Um, but I,
Did she go to Eugene
oh yeah, that's where I
before she
was.
was pregnant?
Well,
Right. So,
that's what I suspect. See, I
okay.
wonder, in those days it was very shameful to
Mhm.
be
Yes.
pregnant out of
Right.
wedlock. And so I wonder if perhaps she got pregnant when she was in the Midwest and her father said, "Why don't you go out to the West Coast and, take care of that so that everybody in town doesn't see your belly get big." It's just a hunch. There's a picture of her in front of the house that she lived in Eugene. And when she's pregnant, this was, I think, February of
Mhm.
69. So it's right before I was born in March. And women were very slim in those days. And the other women in the photo have, a little bit of weight on them. They're all in winter clothes, so you can't really tell. And I thought maybe this was, what they called in those
Oh,
days a home for wayward girls. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
that's, I don't know. I really don't know what the
did you find
situation
out
was.
if there was a home like that in Eugene at the time? Because that's the place
I
to
did a little
start.
poking around. I couldn't find anything about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's see, where do I pick up? So, um, yeah, so met who would have been my stepfather, started to put these pieces together of who she was. I'll fast forward a little bit again to the record. So there's another song, one of the adoption songs on the record is called Gypsy Rose. And it's sort of a story song that talks about Barb's life at the time that she had me. So it's when she went out to Eugene and all of that stuff. And I sent the song to Richard and was really pleased to hear that he felt like I really captured her spirit in the
Mhm.
song, which was really nice to hear because I I wanted that, and but I also felt like, look, it's a song. I have poetic justice. I can create a character in the song, and
Right.
I can tell it the way that I want to. I don't have to worry too much about that. But it was nice to know that I kind of hit the mark on that. That was really
You did
touching.
both.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so yeah, so here we are, January 2010, and shortly after that, I was on a plane born for Appalachian, Ohio. And they live right in the very southern tip of Ohio on the Ohio River, right across from West Virginia. I learned that my birth mother was really into Appalachian music. She played a little bit of lap dulcimer, mountain
Oh,
dulcimer, they
Oh,
call it,
yeah, of
and
course.
was mainly a violin player, classically trained and really good, like first chair in the Eugene Symphony. And she had spent time with an organization called Wood Thrush, which was like, I think, a state-run thing, went into the hills and contacted people to collect all kinds of folklore, music, weaving, uh, home remedies, all different types of art. So she was really fascinated by all of that.
she's interesting.
Very interesting. A serial student. She was close to getting her PhD, like super, super smart. Um, And yeah, so I took that trip out in 2010, and it was just amazing. Just
Now, had they
super cool.
known about you? Had her
They had,
mother known? Okay, they did
yeah,
know about
they
you.
did.
Okay.
Yeah, they learned about it later. Um, I
Later
don't,
after you were born?
oh yeah, after I was born. Yeah, sometime in the 70s. I don't know exactly when. I do know that Cynthia, my aunt, learned about it when they were changing clothes to get into their bathing suits.
Okay.
That's when she learned. I'm not sure when my grandmother learned exactly. My
I was gonna say
grandmother,
because you called the grandmother right away
yeah,
and
and
was
she,
and you
yeah,
were
and that,
just welcomed.
yes,
Okay.
and in that phone call, she said, "I have pined for you all these years."
Oh,
So
Gosh.
it was very healing for her for me to come into her life.
Yeah.
She lost my birth mother, and then on the day that I applied for the birth record, December 27th, my Aunt Cynthia died. So she had
Oh,
just
oh
lost
gosh.
two daughters in a few months.
yeah.
And then 3 weeks to the day after losing Cynthia, I arrived.
Very
And
healing.
she and my birth mother were estranged at the time of her death. Um, and there was definitely, I don't want to get too into it, but there was a strained relationship there. And so, me kind of entering the picture and her learning that I had a good upbringing and was okay came as a big relief to her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and um, Yes. And, her preference would have been for the family to raise me somehow. Either my
Right.
grandmother raised me or my aunt. That would have been my grandmother's preference. So it was something that she and my birth mother did not, agree on,
Mm-hmm.
that choice that Barb made.
In the family that you grew up in, what was it a creative family or was that
Y-
part of your life?
Yeah, my mom was an elementary school music teacher
Oh,
and was,
good.
the choir director at church. She was the music director in plays that I was in as a kid. So, we spent my young life, mom and I gigging together essentially. There was music around the house all the time. There was a piano and a ukulele, a couple of ukuleles that I
Mhm.
gravitated to when I was like 4 years old and started making up little songs. They put me into piano lessons in the second grade, and then I ended up doing guitar lessons in middle school. I have another hunch that maybe Barb was presented with different options for,
Mm.
families to place me in. And maybe when she saw the music teacher, she's like, that's who I want.
Yeah,
Just
I was,
a hunch.
yeah, another good coincidence though to end up with
Yeah.
a
I was
musical
Yeah.
gonna
family.
say, yeah, because you're allowed to blossom as a musician, and so many
Yeah.
people are trapped in a family where you're like not at all
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, gosh, what
Hmm.
So that trip was just incredible. My family had been in that area for like 5 generations, all the way back to the Ohio land grants.
interesting
And this
too.
was something I have a hard time kind of putting into words, but I like felt like a sense of place. Like when I was there, I was
Yeah,
Hmm.
like, yeah, yeah. I remember one
100%.
time driving along the Ohio River and just thinking like, wow, my people have been here for years and
Mm-hmm.
years and years. Like that was really, really powerful. Um, it was really healing for me to kind of see myself mirrored in my family.
Yeah.
I'd mentioned kind of the anxiety and depression and substance abuse. This is not stuff that I had in common with my parents at all. Like, with alcohol, like they could have a couple glasses of wine, have a nice time with their friends and not get carried away. But when I started into drugs and alcohol, it was just full tilt.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up getting sober in 1995. It'll be 30 years in
Congratulations.
December.
Yeah, it's big.
I was California. I've been California sober for part of that time. At this point, I'm clean and sober. Um, but definitely alcohol. I'll never touch it again.
Mm-hmm.
But,
Same.
I was, they modeled a very positive, you know, relationship with that kind of thing. But I went full on from the
I mean,
beginning.
well, and adopted people are also really overrepresented in,
Very.
I think I heard
uh,
a stat on one of the episodes that I listened to of you guys that was mind-boggling. Like, do you remember that? It was like the percentage of the general public is this, and the
Oh,
percentage
right.
of adoptees is, I was like blown
right,
away.
30 to 35%
Something like
in
Yes.
that. And then,
rehabs.
yeah,
And
and
we're
then
only
isn't it like,
2.5% of the
2%. Yeah.
population. Yeah.
yeah, so
It is
Yeah.
yeah,
staggering when you look at it like that, right? And
for sure.
suicides and everything else that are
Yeah,
so prevalent because so many people suffer this. I'm glad you're talking about it because it's actually very important.
yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of the unpacking that I did was
Sure.
like, okay,
Yeah.
and so to learn that, my birth mother definitely struggled with drugs and alcohol through her entire
Mm-hmm.
life. She
Mm-hmm.
was still using at the time that she died.
Mm.
My uncle was in recovery at the time I met him.
Okay.
So he had been down that path um, as well.
Cynthia too.
No, Cynthia, straight and narrow, ran a Christian school for kids. The Beatles,
Beatles.
well, the
Yeah.
The
Beatles, they were into
Beatles. That's
psychedelics
right.
and everything else, but
Right.
They were.
no, she was not on that path. But so that was really interesting to, especially to bond with my uncle and to recognize, like, the fruit doesn't fall far from the
No.
tree. And interestingly, my grandfather was adopted as well,
Oh,
and
Oh,
wow.
he
was
was.
in a foster home for I think 2 years or maybe a year and a half.
The father of your mother that you
Yes.
think maybe helped her go west. Interesting.
Yeah. Um, and I will mention this. I want to be a little bit sensitive to her privacy, but my birth mother also had some significant trauma in the time before I was
Oh,
born, shortly
okay.
before I was born.
Yeah.
Um, and so, that was a lot for me to kind of understand, is it called generational trauma or
Yeah.
transgenerational trauma?
Yeah.
To sort of look at, my grandfather being in foster care for that long,
Yeah.
um, and then my birth mother and what she went through.
And
And
it would have been harsh in those times too.
Oh,
In
another
the era in which he was in foster care would have
yeah,
been, or
yeah,
orphanage would have been
yeah,
bad.
yeah.
whole different
Oh
level.
yeah, he was in an
Hmm.
orphanage. Sorry, it wasn't foster care. It was an
Yeah,
orphanage. Yeah,
orphanage.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
And what was I just gonna say?
Finding out about her trauma.
Yeah, her trauma and yeah, I lost my train of thought, but
When you went to Ohio, I'm at the year anniversary of having a big reunion in Colorado where I was just with my whole biological mother's side, and I just felt so calm. Every anxiety I have
mm,
is just not there when I was there. Did you feel a sense of that kind of grounding with people and when you're,
not quite yet. I think
yeah.
after a lot of the EMDR and all the
Mm-hmm.
trauma work and different facets of my life, came to that place
Mm-hmm.
eventually, but still was, you know,
Yeah, a
yeah,
little bit
not
still.
like super
Yeah.
cool and calm.
No, it took me 20 years. I mean,
Yeah,
just
yeah,
wondered when you mentioned going there and how it
yeah,
felt
but
to
it
be.
was an incredible trip. Oh, I was talking about sort of being mirrored and seeing
Mm-hmm.
myself
Right.
and learning to cut myself slack for some of these traits and some of
Right.
these things that I dealt with. So, I had like my dad, 6'6", super cool, mellow guy, a gentle giant, just a wonderful human, very comfortable in his own skin. Um, and then, I had these other, issues of kind of self-doubt and
Mm,
anxiety and depression
right.
and all of this stuff, that I really worked hard to, have a poker face and not let on. I think I did a
Absolutely.
really remarkable job of kind of fooling people.
Chameleon.
And
Which I think
that,
takes its toll on you
It
emotionally
does.
and physically. And
yeah,
as I too would have really try to hide who I was,
Same.
yeah,
find myself still somewhat doing that. And it has taken its toll,
yeah,
100%.
yeah. For me, I remember, in that sort of unearthing, excavating, unpacking period, at one point in like a very emotional moment with Elaine, I said, I'm the one who's supposed to have it all together, you know? Like, I'm the straight A kid. I'm
Right.
headlining the piano recital. I'm the star of the play. Like, I'm supposed to have it all together. And it was just like, whoa, wait a minute. What's that? Okay, there's something to look into. Um, so that was a breakthrough moment.
Those things come
Um,
out in fights. My ex-husband heard a lot of those things, like because I was always together and did well, but when they come out, you're like, what is wrong with me? Like, and he kind of looked at me like, wow, what's going on? Right? It's so under there, like Sarah
yeah,
said, keeping it in and
yeah. I
mm,
think a lot of that drive and motivation to succeed, there was definitely kind of an I'll show you attitude in there.
right, right.
A little bit of like, and there was a voice in my very subconscious, kind of under the radar kind of voice of like, well, if my own birth mother didn't want me, I
Of
must be
course.
fucked up,
Hmm.
And so I think a lot of that drive to excel kind of came from that sort of I'll show you attitude.
Yeah, you don't want
Um,
anybody to see who you really are. It's very
yeah, and there's
scary.
also kind of like, if I sort of feel, unworthy or whatever, like I'm gonna try to put on this front of, success and feathers in my cap to
Hmm.
kind of overpower that voice.
Hmm.
Um, and there was another thought I was just getting to. So, I wanted to sort of, speak a little bit to Nancy Verrier's um, concept, I guess, of the false sense of self, the idea that the separation from the birth mother, since you haven't really identified yourself as a separate self yet, right
Hmm.
when you're born. What do they say? I think it's something like 6 months after you're
Yeah.
born that you um, sort of differentiate or something.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm
At
getting the
six
language
months
right.
ish, you
Yeah,
start to see yourself as separate than your mother.
yeah. And so that separation at birth, you experience it as a loss of sense of self, a
Hmm.
loss of self.
Hmm.
And so the idea of that false sense of self being a common issue with adoptees, that resonated with me. And there was an analogy that we came up with of sort of like scaffolding. So if here's like kind of like, like for me, I'm really into Buddhist philosophy. So if there's sort of my Buddha nature or
Mm.
my true self, or, whatever you want to call it, um, sort of building these layers of scaffolding, sort of around to sort of protect that
Mhm.
vulnerable place. Um, so that resonated with me, and I think I was quite skilled at putting up those facades and that false sense of self. I think
Yeah.
I was good at it. So when all of this stuff kind of came up, it was, it was unnerving. It was
Yeah.
like, how do I find sort of stable ground?
Plus,
And
we adapt, right?
Yeah.
We have to learn to adapt right away. And so that is
yeah,
how we kind of go through life,
yeah, that was a
figuring
lesson.
out.
Yeah, yeah, that was a
Mhm.
lesson that I learned from the trauma stewardship counselor. She kind of explained to me because I was kind of getting down on myself for kind of being, can we swear on the podcast or not? Or do you want a clean
Yeah,
language?
Yes,
you
of
can.
course.
Okay. I kind of
Not
got
for
down on
children, it's
myself.
fine.
Yeah. Kind of for being full of shit. It was a little
Yeah.
bit down on myself. And she's like, look, you did what you needed to do to protect yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
You had this pain. Um, you weren't in a position at that point to cope with that.
That's
You
right.
couldn't face it. And so you developed these techniques and these, adaptations or whatever
Yeah.
to sort of to protect yourself as you need it. And now you're in a
Mhm.
position where you can face that stuff and you can reconcile it. But look at that as a useful,
Mhm.
that was useful at the time. You needed it. And then she had this great analogy, like you can take that, take those things and, put them in a boat and send them down the river and kind of let them go and say, thank you for your service. I
Mhm.
don't need you anymore. And maybe somebody else, can make use of that now. And that was really, a very pivotal moment, I think, for me to kind of understand, like, I don't need to beat myself up and
No.
get down on myself
I like those
about stuff.
analogies. My therapist had one of visiting the cemetery. You can visit it. You don't live there, the whole
Mm,
thing. You don't live in the cemetery, but you can visit it. Let's put
yeah,
it there. You're allowed to.
yeah,
But just acknowledgement, right? It's so what you were saying, because we have a man in our Patreon group who coined us as survivors at this point. We're survivors because many adoptees don't have, the three of us have kind of done well in the adoptee world, right? So many don't get to this level.
yeah.
They don't go into the try to succeed mode. They go into the it's just inward and horrible and
Mm,
self-harm to another level.
right.
So it's sad.
Yeah, yeah,
It's big stuff.
yeah.
So, did you have kids?
No,
So the mirroring was the first
Yeah.
yeah, that was
time
really,
that,
really cool. Yeah. In the, in that first visit to Ohio, um, they talked about that. My uncle, I remember early on, we were standing outside of a restaurant and he's like, I hope it's not weird, but I'm looking in your eyes and like, your eyes remind me of hers. And not only
Mhm.
the way they look, but the way they move. And same
Mhm.
with your hand gestures. Your hands look just like hers and you gesture the way that she did. My great grandfather, um, they said I really reminded them of him as well, like the way that I carried myself and the way I sat. They gave me a hat that was his. I put it on my head and it was just like a perfect fit, like just like it had been on my head all my life. So that was really powerful.
Yeah.
And like I said, it kind of helped me to have more self-acceptance.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, and it was super cool. Both my grandmother's siblings were in the area at the time. My great uncle has since passed, and they lived right in a very, very close proximity, right on the Ohio River. My grandma and great uncle were like next door neighbors. You could look out their back door and you could see the river. And then my other great aunt lived right up the road, just a couple miles. And so I arrived, you know, this, early 40s, just like soaking up every bit of family history I could get, just like, tell me everything. We got to watch, there was a video that they taped of my great grandparents in the 80s. Um, and at one point, my great grandfather, he was a teacher, a principal, a carpenter, a farmer. He like had fruit trees and stuff. And at one point he said, like, I'm just not satisfied if I don't have a job to do. And I just like raised my hand. I go, hello. And then my
Yeah.
uncle was like, me too, you know. So just kind of, you know, understanding that stuff, you know,
Yeah.
what's in the genes. Um, like I said, I was able to cut myself a lot of slack as a result of that.
Definitely healing to find
Yeah,
out
for
about that.
sure.
And you're still in touch. You said your grandmother is still alive, so you talked to
Yep.
her and your
Yep.
That's
uncle.
neat.
Oh yeah, we're super close. Yeah, in fact, if you go check me out on Facebook, my uncle wrote the most heartwarming, amazing post about, he's like rides a motorcycle, owns a tattoo supply shop,
Yeah.
and he said, to a lot of his friends, he goes, if you know me, this is not a word I would normally use, but it's been a blessing,
Oh.
so, it's really been this two-way street. It's been a blessing for both sides.
Well, you
Um,
heal a lot of people. You're a missing link in their family, and I found that like like I'm always like thank you, and they're like no, thank you.
yeah,
Also, you bring back
yeah,
people to them, and
yeah.
I'm
Speaking of missing
curious.
link, when we were driving
Yeah.
in Ohio, coming close to the town where they lived, there was a billboard and it said, "You are the missing link."
You should have
And we're like,
taken
"Oh
that
my
picture.
God." Yeah, we did. Yeah, we
Another
You
got a
did?
picture.
coincidence,
Yeah,
another
totally.
strange coincidence.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
tell us about the record and where people can get it. And
Hmm.
The record is called Fade Away Blue. It'll be released on August 22nd, Friday,
Okay.
August 22nd. I don't know when this will air, but maybe it's out already. It's available pretty much anywhere you can find music. It's distributed through a company called The Orchard. So, if you go into a record store, if they don't have it, you'll be able to order it, or you can find it on all the streaming services or at
Oh,
my Bandcamp
great.
page, puzzletreerecords.bandcamp.com. It's a very deeply personal record. Like the
Hmm.
bio that they wrote for it, kind of talks about it as sort of like sort of an autobiographical. There's an autobiographical thread that runs through the record. I think I mentioned before the cornerstone songs on the album touch upon my adoption. So
Hmm.
there's two songs that address missing meeting my birth mother. There's a song called Lonely Mama, which I released actually as a single last year. My friend Mike McCready from Pearl Jam has a little 7-inch vinyl record
Mm.
company, and we put that out as a single last year, and that'll also be on the new album. And then we just released in July the single for Song for Barbara Ann,
Oh,
and that's the song. Both of those I wrote sort of speaking to my birth mother. So
yeah.
what we were just talking about, the lyrics to Song for Barbara Ann is, I've got your hazel eyes and a streak that is blue. They say it's uncanny how much I remind them of you. I've got your photographs and your old violin, and that makes a difference, giving me glimpses of who you had been.
Mm.
And then it sort of goes into, having missed meeting her and stuff like that in the lyrics. So those two songs, and then the song "Gypsy Rose," I think I mentioned earlier, which
Yeah.
kind of traces her life as a free-spirited hippie in the '60s, around the time I was born. Kind of address that side of the adoption, and then on the other side of the coin is the song that leads off the album. It's called "You Called Me Kid,"
Hmm.
and that's one that I wrote for my dad after he passed away in 2015. And when I played it live, I always would say, like, I wrote this for my dad after he passed away, but I dedicate it to both my parents.
Yeah.
And then, I think I mentioned earlier, my mom passed away just 3 days before the
Mm.
single came out. So that was
Yeah.
really
mm,
intense and powerful. I was able to, she was in hospice, and I was able to, sit at her bedside in her final days and play like a
Oh, you
finger-picked
played it
mellow
for her.
version for her. That was a very special moment that I'll always cherish. And um, so, yeah, that song is just a song of love and gratitude. The chorus says, "You called me kid, and I can't thank you enough for what you did. You called me kid. Never in this life could anybody find a more generous or precious gift to give." And so
Mm.
that's just, a thank you song to my folks.
It's beautiful.
And and then the rest of the album, you sort of drop into different periods of my life. It's not a concept record per se, but I did kind of choose the rest of the material on the album so that it could live alongside, especially Song for Barbara Ann. Like that was kind of the keystone song of the album. Everything else had to fit with that
Hmm.
song. So there's a song called Sundown at Francis Nash, which you find yourself in my sort of wild, drug-addled, psychedelic teenage years. There's a song called Fading Fast, which is kind of my, road dog touring days in the 90s, playing music everywhere. There's a song called Bare Tree that speaks to the sort of durability of my relationship with my wife, Elaine, who's also my musical partner. There's a song Taking Leave of My Senses, which speaks very directly to substance abuse. Um, and then Fade Away Blue is the title track, and that'll be kind of what they call the emphasis track when the album
Mhm.
drops on the 22nd. And that's a song, kind of timely. I don't know if you guys have caught the whole, is it Sydney Sweeney with the whole
Yeah.
jeans and jeans controversy or
Yeah.
whatever it is? Um, this song sort of has that same analogy of jeans and jeans.
Jeans and
And
jeans.
so it's, um, the second verse is like, I'm weathered and worn, tattered at the heel, unadorned. I'm so broken in, tattered, thinning at the knee, finding comfort in my own skin. And
Like
then the
that.
chorus says, now when the tears come, I know I've got work to do. Now when the tears come, fade away blue.
It's
And then,
beautiful.
and then the third verse, I live in the fray and turn another new shade lighter every day. Another walk in the sun, another hand-me-down child who knows I'm not the only one.
Mhm.
Mm,
And
good.
so, that kind of speaks to, sort of learning that, my uncle, like we kind of have these
Yeah.
similar issues, like, okay, another hand-me-down child, like I come upon this naturally.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then sort of that process, the slow process of, it's not a light switch that you just turn off or whatever. It's like kind of a slow, gradual process of kind of,
I don't
you
know
know,
that the light ever gets turned off or on. It's like on, we keep going through this. I think
yeah,
things come up and come up. I'm curious about your father if you ever do find him.
yeah,
Maybe a whole nother.
yeah,
I hope you do for,
yeah, me too. Yeah.
you
And,
know.
and I've just been so crazy busy. I do want to get proactive about searching again, now that the record is out.
Yeah.
But I also, another sort of facet of my life has been chronic fatigue,
Mm.
which I've been dealing with since it'll be 10 years in September.
Mm,
And it was really severe for several of those years. The
Oh,
last few years have been workable, and I'm kind of gradually, doing better and better to the
yeah.
point where I can work now. But I can't, it's still to the point where about 4 times this year I've had episodes where I've completely crashed
Yeah.
from overdoing it. So, putting out a record 2025, it's a lot of work. We did a couple
Yeah.
singles and we've been doing our first touring in many, many years.
I was just going to ask if you had any plans to tour. So
Yeah, we'll be in the East Coast in September.
Oh, so will
Um,
we. You
yeah.
should come to
we're
our, we have,
doing
yeah,
a live podcast in DC on September 13th.
with
13th.
lots of adoptees.
Mm-hmm.
13th. Oh my God. You know what? We're going to be in, wait, what day of the week is that? Is that a
It's a
Saturday?
Saturday.
Saturday.
We're in Boston.
Oh,
We're close. We're in Vienna in the DC area
yeah, Vienna.
2 days before that. I miss it by 2 days. Rats.
Mm,
Oh
Come
man.
darn.
on.
I'll be in Boston right before that, but we'll probably
Yeah.
miss each other.
Yeah. Wow.
That's too bad.
Well,
Yeah.
send us tour dates and send us all the
Okay.
links, and we'll put everything in the show notes, and we'll see if we can release this sooner than later. So that
Yeah,
will be helpful to the
Cool.
record. And
Great.
yeah, it was really great meeting you.
it
What an
was.
interesting talk. And
Yeah.
it's always nice to talk to people that are in that healing process world, have done the
Yeah.
work. It's
That's right.
Yeah.
makes the conversations much more enlightening.
Yeah. And it's
It
been
does.
interesting, putting this record out, and you're the second adoption related podcast that I've done. And telling the story
Yeah.
in other podcasts. It's been interesting to kind of get back in that headspace a bit, and
And
sort of,
honestly, you help people when you say, when you have this story, there's someone out there listening that's your story will be the relatable story to them.
it was a big motivation for me to kind of take a bigger swing with this record.
Hmm.
My wife and I, we've been pretty content to kind of release our records kind of under the radar. And,
Hmm.
before the chronic fatigue happened, I would work as a producer for other people's records here in my studio. I would do work as a composer for film and TV, and I would just kind of put my records out under my own name and the side project that we did called the Trojan Summers Band, kind of quietly. We didn't do press and promo stuff that
Yeah.
much. But with this record, we're like, okay, well, let's do all this stuff. Let's get out there and share the story. And a big part of that motivation is because I look back and I go, why did I never hear about adoption
Right.
trauma
Hmm.
when I
No,
was young? And in our generation,
none of us.
you didn't even know what anxiety was.
No.
There was no language for it. I think about kids today, they grow up and they understand that it's a thing. And in my case, it was just like this mysterious thing that I didn't understand and that I just kind of felt push the feelings down. Don't,
It was
Exactly.
like,
hide
what's
it.
wrong with you when it came out?
Exactly.
If mine came out, it was like people look at you, what's wrong with you? And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
Kevin."
Yeah. So, that is a big motivation for,
Yeah.
doing these kind of interviews and sharing the story around the record.
Right.
Is just thinking if there's, some 19-year-old kid loaded out of his brain,
Mhm.
wondering what the fuck is going on and goes, oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe
Right.
I'll look into that too, so that's,
And we can provide you with some search angels to help you.
And
oh, yeah.
yes. Uh-huh.
Okay.
They do it
Yeah.
for
Great.
free, and they do it like this.
Really?
Yeah, it's-
My birth mother was also adopted and she died in 2009. So we had no information about her father, or I had a search angel find out who he was within days.
days.
Wow.
So
Wow. Okay.
yeah. So connect with us
Great.
offline and we'll.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Pete.
Thank
Really
Yeah.
you.
great talking to you.
Yeah. Thank
Really
you guys.
enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Pete.
Okay. Take care.
Take
Bye.
care.